My name is Mike, and I'm here to read a comic. And today's comic is The Invincible Iron Man, issue number 72, dated January 1974. This is an issue that I did enjoy for the most part. As I had mentioned before, I was never really a fan of Iron Man's solo adventures. I found his early adventures a little tedious because they had that love affair between Tony Stark and what was the name, Pepper something. Anyway, I didn't care for that. That got on my nerves. The office room romance that went nowhere, and a lot of that was kind of resolved in the main edition. But I didn't really care for it as a kid. There's a lot of Sino-Pacific politics in Iron Man that I really didn't care for. I didn't really care much for Iron Man's middle-aged problems, the ones I'm kind of going through. But nevertheless, as an adult, I did enjoy this. It is a little meta in that this battle is actually taking place at what is largely regarded as the first official Comic-Con. This is the Comic-Con that was in San Diego. I was partially there once. I was in San Diego during one of the days. I didn't get any tickets to go in because comic book conventions had changed since I was a kid. The first one I went to was in 1979. It was held at the Sheraton Hotel that's still there. It's on like 57th and 7th. And it was a blast. I only had $3.50 with me. As sad as it was, $3.50. I left with 4 comic books, a mint edition of X-Men number 36, which would be worth a lot now. And I'd gotten 2 issues of Superboy, which I still have. It's issue number 203. I spoke about that one. And 204, which I'll speak about soon. And I got an issue, I think it was Batman 232. That was Ra's al Ghul's first appearance. But the thing is, someone had spilled the coffee on the comic. So I bought it for $1, but it was in like a $1 condition. And it was probably only selling at that simply because it was still a Neil Adams issue. So anyway, the issue here is a lot of some fun. They do make reference to members of the bullpen. They do poke fun at some of the comic book convention attendees, similar to the type of criticisms that a comic book guy would give out. But except this time, comic book guy is the one being criticized.
Very well. I must hurry back to my comic book store where I dispense the insults rather than absorb them.
And you have to remember, these are adults who are getting criticism from kids. So that kind of has to fuck with their heads a little bit. Also, there is an interesting letter in here. There is an interesting letter about the racism that this particular reader had noticed about the comic. Again, there was a lot of Pacific Sino, which is China, politics at the time. Remember, China had just opened up to the Western world for the first time in 25 years. And this was Nixon and Mao and so forth. So a lot of that was still on the table. The letter was from an Asian American reader. He mentioned the racism. He pointed it out. And editorial basically started with, we take accusations of racism very seriously in our comic books. And it ends with, hey, you stupid. It is wild and racist. So anyway, I'm going to take a quick look at the cover. It's during the end of the Iron Nose era. So Iron Nose is still here, but this is around the time we were starting to... they were going to do away with that. I had mentioned earlier the reason for the Iron Nose error, or error, either one, was that apparently Stan Lee was musing that, hey, how come Iron Man doesn't have a nose? And apparently he wasn't taking that. He was just throwing out a question. He wasn't taking it seriously. However, one of the office flunkies did take it seriously, and he had said that, listen, we got a edict from Stan Lee that Iron Man is to be drawn with a nose. And this went on for a year and a half until Stan Lee had shown up in the Marvel offices, and he noted, hey, how come Iron Man has a nose now? So that's sort of like they're going to end that time. And our four main villains, because it's comic convention, so he has a lot: Whiplash, the Melter, the Man Bull, and the Black Llama, who is one of those old kind of like Asian stereotype villains. Okay, so I'm going to get into the story. So then we go into the splash page, and we're told this is Convention of Fear. The creative team is Mike Friedrich, and the art is by George Tuska and Vince Coletta, which that normally is not a good combo for a kid looking to spend their 25 cents. Whenever I picked up an Iron Man comic during this time, it was only because of the cover. I liked Iron Man. I liked Iron Man in the Avengers. I did not like Iron Man solo stories, because these were not written for like a 7-8-year-old like me. So anyway, what we're told here is that I almost said Spider-Man. Iron Man is here in San Diego, and apparently part of this story was plotted by Barry Alfonso of San Diego, California. So they specifically wanted to do an issue like this. And obviously, Barry, he's a native of San Diego. There is some name dropping, place droppings. I do recognize some of them. San Diego is a beautiful city. I completely recommend going there. It can be a little hectic during the comic convention, but it's a terrific city. So anyway, Iron Man, he's flying through San Diego. And apparently his last adventure was in Asia. So he kind of went a long way here. But it makes sense he would go in this direction. But we're told by the omnipotent narrator in the dialogue boxes that, we'll tell you that a little later on. But then we're pointed to some shadowy figures on a rooftop. So as Iron Man's flying through these shadowly figures, they say, now's the time to fire. Blast him. And then we see Iron Man. He's under attack by this very powerful blast. However, he's able to fly under the laser beam here. So he's currently unharmed. One of the two figures on the rooftop yells, "Fool, you missed. We're in for it now." And we're told this is Mission Drugs, and there's Pacific Comics. I remember there was a place called that. I think it was on Ocean Beach. Ocean Beach is a really nice place. That's mostly where the residents of the city stay. Because kind of like the other beach, La Jolla, in Pacific Beach. Those areas are more like for the tourist. Going to turn the page. So Iron Man, he notices that he was shot at. He wasn't hit, but he noticed that someone tried to take his head off here. He doubles back to the rooftop. He sees the weapon is there intact. However, there's no one there, so it looks like the perpetrators had gotten away. Iron Man notes that this is a very sophisticated weapon. And he's kind of wondering why they would leave it behind. Obviously, they don't want to get caught. But the thing is, he makes note of the fact that he's going to have to talk to this inventor. He kind of wants to get an idea of what this guy's doing. However, he doesn't like... He does destroy the device, though, which I'm not sure... Well, on one hand, he wouldn't really have a place to store it, because you might want to like look at it and examine it, but nevertheless, he just destroys it, and he does it off screen here. That's what kind of caught me by surprise. So then he flies off. He kind of leaves all that junk behind. It looks like there are 3 perpetrators. They're all talking in the dark here, so we don't have an idea who they are, even though we're told who they are on the cover. One of them is admonishing the other for the laser blast. That not only did he miss the target, he actually left the laser there. The guy who apparently designed the device, he kind of doesn't want to talk about it. He's saying, listen, I left a valuable piece of equipment on that rooftop that's since been destroyed. I really don't want to talk about it. He's talking like the guy who blew, like, his weekly paycheck at the casino. You kind of listen, okay, I know good decisions weren't made, and I really don't want to talk about it. The other guy's apologetic here. So, he realizes, hey, I need this guy on my team, and I should kind of cool it. Because he also might have more devices, and he might use that shit on me. So anyway, it doesn't matter. They're still after Iron Man, though. So these 3 individuals, they just didn't fire at any random hero. They specifically were targeting Iron Man. Because I guess they got some type of information that Iron Man had reached San Diego, probably from whomever he was battling in Asia. We weren't given the specifics, though he was probably fighting the Mandarin, which meant that he would be in China. So anyway, these shadowy figures, we'll encounter them later. Then we kind of have a flashback here of a jet arriving in San Diego International Airport, even though it looks like they're taking off. So the artist George Tuska here forgot how physics works. I'm going to turn the page. Oh, we're also told that Daredevil and Shanna and the Black Widow will be in the next issue of Daredevil as they're fighting the Owl. Yeah, you got these 2 hot, sexy chicks, and they got the sweaty, middle-aged Owl to deal with. Gonna turn the page. So on that flight is Tony Stark. Obviously, he's
Tony Stark makes you feel he's a cool exec with a heart of steel.
He's traveling first class here. He's thinking of the kind of what occurred in the past issues, which would be Iron Man 68 through 71. And we're told this is Roy Thomas who's given us this. And there was a Tumo, the Mandarin, and the Yellow Claw. The Yellow Claw and the Mandarin were going at it. The Yellow Claw won that fight. And there was a new Mandarin christened. But nevertheless, these things did affect Tony Stark. He's also thinking of Roxy Gilbert. Roxy Gilbert is Tony Stark's current love interest. She was the love interest in that issue of Iron Man that I talked through, issue number 63. And apparently Roxy had been around since the mid-50s. So Roxy's been in about 20 issues of Iron Man. He says he regrets leaving her behind. I think at this point they had given up on Roxy as a character. I guess Roxy was supposed to be, Tony Stark's adult relationship, and maybe the fans didn't warm to her, or to her character. So Tony Stark's kind of a free agent again. He's blaming Roxy for going to Asia. He's like, that bitch made me do it. Then it says that he went to Vietnam and, quote, seeking out my friend Eddie March, his brother Marty, missing from the Vietnam War. My unexpected battles led me away from her. Okay, so he's saying the fact that he had to do these battles in Asia, kind of messed up the relationship here. Tony Stark's also mentioning that he's missed a lot of board meetings too, and he still has corporate business as Tony Stark to deal with. So he kind of doesn't know what's going on at this point. Now, the excuse that he landed in San Diego was that Stark Industries had opened up a new facility there, and the facility has been reporting some resource issues, like they're missing equipment and so forth. And Tony Stark is there to oversee it because I guess it hasn't fully opened yet. So Tony Stark's reasoning to be in San Diego is on business, and he's there to kind of check to see if the facility is going to be running right. It looks like he has the factory is near Chula Vista. Chula Vista, yeah. The trolley system, and it's briefly mentioned here. The trolley system goes to Chula Vista. Again, San Diego is beautiful. The only areas that were a little sketchy were toward the public library. San Diego has a great public library, but kind of the area around there near Safeco Field it's a little sketchy. And one time when I was in San Diego, there actually was a serial killer targeting the homeless. I think once the publicity got out, that person kind of stopped, thankfully. But nevertheless, that was really the only area that I found to be unsafe in San Diego. So anyway, he's checking the facilities. He's talking about how he wants to fly back to Saigon. This is 1974. I'm not sure how many commercial flights were going to and from Saigon, given that they were, one, at war, civil war, and two, there's the Saigon part of the country was losing. So I'm going to turn the page. So as Tony is waiting for his electronic parts, I'll take a look at this ad. Get it all together when you get out of the service. So this is a correspondence course for electronics. This guy, Joe, he's showing off his trophy wife. You know, he got into electronics. He passed the correspondence course. He got a job, whatever. He's making a ton of money. And he's saying, "Hey, check out the hoe." The other guy's just a complete loser, saying, "Listen, I can't do anything." This makes the date feel better, saying, "Wow, could have ended up with that loser." But yeah, they say go into electronics. And this is an in-house ad. I've talked about this one. This is the Mighty Marvel calendar for 1975, and this is the origin of Marvel Comics. This was on the bestsellers list. It was kind of like a mixed blessing for Stan Lee. On one hand, he could say he was a best-selling author, but on the other hand, it was like for comic books. So I'm going to go back to the story. And we see the guys in the facility. They're meeting Tony Stark here. Tony Stark is being asked, "What are you doing about inflation, Mr. Stark?" It should be reminded that Tony Stark he does own a number of companies in the industrial industry. Nevertheless, he's not president of the United States. He's not the Secretary of Commerce. It's not his job to handle what's going on with inflation. So I'm not sure why this Peter Parker guy is asking. Tony's saying, "Whew, that's a tough one, mister." Well, for one, it's not my job. But I think that can be answered with one word: productivity. You see, the more we produce, the lower prices will be. So it's that simple. It's just that. It's just that simple. Just please the 1% and everything will be great. However, we see two individuals, and they're not hearing that. They're hearing something else. And they have kind of this hypnotic look on their faces. One of them looks very Neanderthal. So it looks like the Geico caveman doesn't like what Tony Stark's saying. and they're being compelled by a voice to destroy Tony Stark. So they both bum rush Tony Stark with metal pipes here. They reach out, they go out, and they're on the attack. They're swinging the pipes. Tony Stark is agile enough to miss it, to miss these swings though. And he's saying, listen, I understand money's tight, hey, I just had to cut everyone's salaries, but, don't take it out on me. It's not like I'm responsible for that. And he's blaming the economy for these guys attacking him. So then Tony does what a good 1%er would like to do. He belts the complainer in the face and knocks him out. There's still the other person, though. He's still attacking. And Tony takes care of him with a kind of like just a jab, really. And we're told under the page that the ever-loving thing meets the vibrant Valkyrie in Marvel 2-in-1 number 7. I had spoken about that issue. I got teary-eyed at the end. That's a great comic book. If you can read that issue, please read it. And turn the page. So we see that the two perpetrators, they're knocked out. Tony Stark is saying, hey, these punks were kind of easy to handle. He's not showing much concern for their health. He's just saying, hey, these two chumps, really, they shouldn't have showed up. However, Tony Stark does notice the hypnotized look they have on their faces. They're blank and lifeless, largely because Vince Colletta did the inking here. I have a couple other comics where Vince inked, and boy, he sucks the soul out of any artist. Same way we see Tony Stark, he's being escorted back, and the police don't take him; they escort him. He's being escorted back to his car. He's like, hey, you guys can pick up the mess there. He realizes that his life might be under threat here, but he's not quite sure what's going on, because he can't figure out why any of these people would suddenly be attacking him now. Tony's kind of like a now guy. Whatever he sees on Fox News is the only thing that's currently happening. Tony's driving off. He feels that there's something familiar about the attacks, but there's also something different. What we as a reader, as someone who has read this comic, I can tell you that these attacks are being kind of pushed and prompted by an individual in this comic. So these are not well thought out attacks, because this is not really their thoughts that are controlling this urge to attack. The same thing with our three upcoming supervillains. They want to destroy Iron Man, but it's sort of like been forced. That train of thought has been forced on them. And the same thing here. That's why Tony Stark is noticing the attacks were very slow and stiff. We see an individual here kind of looking like Dracula, but we can only see him from behind. And he's kind of making these hand gestures here. He's planning on something, and then he disappears. So he might have been thinking about attacking, or he might have just wanted to kind of have a spell, like a Dracula spell, on that vehicle. So at least he's keeping track of Tony Stark's thought waves. Turn the page. I don't really need to see this ad. It's just for grit and comic stuff. Karate stuff. Next ad here, I think I've looked at this before, drafting board. And some very questionable products being sold here. This is like early Timo. So if you wanted to buy scientific Timo, you contacted Edmund Scientific Company. So this is probably just a small company in New Jersey that kind of makes kind of these novelty/quack devices. You can turn the page. So we see Tony Stark. Tony Stark, he doesn't have a regular residence in San Diego, so he has to take a hotel room. Yeah, San Diego has some nice hotels. Beautiful city. And thinking about what to do. Now, one of the things you can do is kind of go to a go-go club. He sees the half-naked dancers. He sees the black guys. So if you know the black guys there, it's a little bit edgy. It's a little bit hip. And there's lots of music. And Tony Stark is saying he had done this before, so it's no big deal. San Diego does have that kind of life, nightlife. It's not as prevalent anymore because it's been so gentrified, particularly the gas lamp quarter. That's a great place. That's the gas lamp quarter in San Diego. That's like Mardi Gras with less vomit. And the other areas of San Diego are so gentrified. They don't really have this nightlife. But there is one thing I remember that was kind of funny. 1992, the Republicans held their convention in San Diego. And it was their family values convention. They were going to emphasize morality and family values. But it turned out that Gerald Ford's son owned like all these like X-rated bookstores, videotape stores, the stripper places. He had there were some of his properties that were engaging in that. So I remember reading the article and Gerald, and this is one of Gerald Ford's sons. He had multiple ones. Gerald Ford was like president for a couple of years, and he had this big shit-eating grin on his face, and the Republicans, they just didn't care. Like, you know, the former president's son they're like, yeah, so what? He can own the strip club. And also, I remember the young Republicans were complaining that the strip clubs were being closed because of the convention. They were having this family values convention, and these guys who were attendees were whining that, you know, they were closing down the strip joints. So anyway, they're mentioning the San Diego Zoo. San Diego Zoo, I never went to the zoo. I'm not a nature person, and I'm not a zoo person. But from what I know, it's supposed to be amazing. But then there's something that captures his eye in the newspaper, and it's not the Padres losing their third straight to the Dodgers. San Diego Padres were not a good team at that point. They had good players like Dave Winfield and Randy Jones, and later Ozzie Smith, but they were not a good team. Raleigh Fingers was also on that team. But there's a comic convention going on. And Tony Stark is reading about the convention. It says, Comic Fan Convention. A comics fan convention continues tonight at the El Corzo Hotel. A comics hero costume masquerade, that's a clumsy sentence, is featured tonight, along with guest speakers Milton Steve Kenoff, Charles Peanut Schwartz, Marvel comic editor Roy Thomas, comics artist Frank Bruner and Bob Foster, writers Don Glutt, Mike Friedrich, Mark Evander, Mike Royko. He used to ink Jack Kirby stuff. So they're kind of naming. No way would a regular newspaper have this much attention to the attendees. But nevertheless, this is something that interests Tony. Tony, he's this powerful middle-aged industrialist, but he's saying comics are cool for me. I'm cool enough to go there.
Tony Stark makes you feel he's a cool exec with a heart
We're
of
also
steel.
told that you can witness the fury of the night creature in Frankenstein number 14. I never bought Marvel's horror titles. I believe James Brown was a fan of Werewolf by Night, but you know, it didn't do anything for me. So anyway, we see Tony here. He's talking about, you know, superhero fans. I tend to forget we Avengers are kind of rock stars these days. You know, maybe just this kind of craziness I'm looking for. So this is going to entertain Tony Stark for the night. And then he holds up the his Iron Man helmet and he says to it, He's speaking out loud because, as we know, the heroes speak out loud. The villains talk to themselves. But he's talking to an inanimate object, which he's speaking to. That's it. We got ourselves a date, Shellhead. And just in case these emergencies reappear, I'll be in perfect costume, my own uniform. So he's risking the lives of all the attendees at this comic convention, which falls in line with, because remember these comic book guys, they're adults and they have to take criticism from kids. So they're going to be like, yeah, we can, maybe if a few less of them will keep the others in line. So anyway, Iron Man, he shows up to the convention. He's at the hotel, the El Quartz Hotel. Apparently they had a tag system where, you once you paid your admission, you were given a tag. I remember that usually they would just stamp your hand with some type of ink. One guy shouting, "I got the number one. I got the number one." And this kind of really weird Danny Bonaducci looking guy says, "Oh wow, wasn't that the Herndon Saunders team first story with Howie Cazell doing backgrounds on pages 8, 12 and a half of 16? And the other guy goes, No, it wasn't. It was Robbie Bell. It was Robbie Bell, not this Kittner guy."
And I am not going to stand here and see that thing cut open and see that little Kentner boy spill out all
And
over the
it was
dock.
every fourth panel, making fun of like how encyclopedic some comic book fans. I heard this stuff does drive the comic book creators crazy. The same way that stat guys would drive baseball guys crazy. So anyway, there's a lot of that going on. I think a lot of these comic creators are trying to get the resentment out. One of the people who is taking admissions, the gatekeeper, the ticket keeper, she notices Iron Man saying, "Hey, that's a really good costume, maybe a little bright. You might want to check out the real Iron Man. Make sure you get it right." He can't take his helmet off, obviously for reasons that he doesn't want to give up his identity. But nevertheless, he's just given the Munker Iron Man, and that's going to be used as his sticker. He has the sticker. Meanwhile, he still has his iron nose here. So these panels are kind of funny here because they have the iron nose. Going to turn the page. And Iron Man here, he's just kind of wandering around enjoying himself. Bunch of ads. I kind of really don't need to go over it. The one that's interesting is sort of this Osimo type robot here that you can buy for $1. It's 100% cardboard. Turn the page. See another ad. The comic book company started printing a lot of these ads because the accountants told them this is where the profits were, and it was due to an accounting error. And they ended up losing a lot of money printing all these ads. But yeah, none of them here seem that interesting. Turn the page. So we're back to the story. We see we see an avatar of some of the creators here. We see one for Roy Thomas. He's somewhat recognizable. He I guess his wife was named Jeanette at this time. He had gone through a divorce, and he was working his divorce out through the Fantastic Four, which is kind of interesting. It looks like this other guy is Mike Friedrichs here. They're talking about John Vanderpool. John Vanderpool. I had spoken about him. He was kind of a production manager at Marvel who his job ended up killing him. I think I talked about him in that X-Men 66 issue. We see Frank Brunner here is being recognized by someone here. There's this really weirdly looking drawn guy. I don't know who he is. And, Frank Brunner's being asked for an autograph, but he says, "I don't have any pencils." And they do mention the ACBA Bill Everett Fund. Bill Everett was at this point he was a comic legend. He had passed away about a year earlier from cancer, so it looks like they were still fundraising for his family. And we see Iron Man. He's making the rounds here, and he's being asked. People don't know he's the real Iron Man. He's kind of cosplaying here. That's what they think he is, kind of a cosplayer. He's being asked about the Star Trek petition. Star Trek famously was canceled, but then renewed because the fans had a letter writing campaign saying that we really love this show and that the ratings don't really reflect how many viewers there are, and that seems to be true because Star Trek has been on TV since its inception, mostly in syndication, but nevertheless, clearly, like Paramount considers it its premier property. So, from humble beginnings, and it looks like the person who's organizing the petition is saying that in 3 years we'll have enough signatures. so yeah, good luck there. He's being asked for an autograph. Now, they don't know this is the real Iron Man, so they're saying, wow, can I have an autograph of the guy who did a really good costume? Some of the fans are pissy about that. One guy, it looks like Mike Friedrichs, he's asking about the nose, saying, damn, that nose looks terrible. He's also complaining that the comics are poorly written and dull. And that's kind of a joke because he's the writer. But he's saying nothing personal, you understand. And I'm sure he's been told that quite a bit when he was being introduced as the writer of Iron Man. They're saying, oh, this fucking hack. Nothing personal, Mike. But apparently there's a talk going on by Bob Foster. I think he was the guy who did Prince Valiant. And it looks like he's popular with these older geeks here. And they kind of drag him along to hear what Bob has to say. We're also told here that Zog is back and the Incredible Hulk has him. I remember buying that issue off the newsstand. So when this issue was out, I was buying that Hulk issue. Turn the page. Same way we see there's a big crowd here. Iron Man is kind of being pushed into it. It is roped off here. So one of the security guards is saying, listen, you know, that outfit you're wearing, it might be kind of dangerous to some people here. And Iron Man, he doesn't understand all the security. And it turns out that the reason is that a rare issue of Purple Pig #1 is going to be auctioned on sale, and they figure it's worth about $5,000. So they're kind of showing off this issue of Purple Pig #1, and it's kind of in this glass casing, you know, probably the same way they would show the Mona Lisa or something. So they're making kind of a big deal that, you know, comic books at this time, people are really starting to notice they were of value. I know even people who did not like comic books and did not understand comic books, they were hearing that. I guess they were interested initially in the value of the comic, but they couldn't care enough to actually to look into comic books. We're told here that there's some events going on, so it isn't just geeks selling comic books. In the film room, we're told that there might be it looks like previews, because there's too many for it to be a running thing, of the 7 Voyages of Sinbad. I remember when they were trying to bring that together. That ended up being a Marvel comic, Sinbad. Captain Marvel, that was their big comic at the time. That's when Jim Steranko was going through that great saga. Gilligan's Island, which is super popular in reruns at the time. There was also the cartoon. and Planet of the Apes. That also had a cartoon, but I think that was a year later. Dracula and Frankenstein. Those were new comics from Marvel at the time. They're trying to promote them. So Iron Man, he looks in the room. He sees the cosplayers. He's really impressed with them. He's saying these guys really put all out. He says this is like being at an Avengers shindig. He says it's the exact same thing. He might as well be in the Avengers mansion, just kind of chilling out with Captain America and everyone else. Captain America is noting that Iron Man is noting that there are a lot of Captain Americas here. Maybe Captain America was their big selling title because Steve Englehart was doing it. And Iron Man's thinking his resignation must have touched off a wave of nostalgia. That was during the latter part of the Steve Englehart Captain America era. I recommend reading that. Turn the page. And again, it was Roy Thomas who was being very helpful. I'm wondering if Roy wrote that letter, which I'll get to a little later on. So then Iron Man encounters another Iron Man. And the only difference between the two of them is that this other Iron Man's badge reads Kenny Lufboff. And the thing is that this Iron Man doesn't have a nose, but the real one does. And the cosplay Iron Man points out, I see you've gone along and added that ridiculous nose to your mask. So I think this is around the time they realized that they can get rid of that edict. And this is their way of saying goodbye to it. Iron Man's a little surprised. He didn't know the fans were watching him that closely. So the thing is, he had the nose foisted on him. He had it on, but the fans were like, "I'm not buying this." A real Iron Man doesn't have a nose. So I think he's kind of speaking for the fans there. Iron Man is thinking he might need to rethink this. So they're selling Iron Nose as a mistake. They're kind of admitting in this panel here that Tony just made a mistake, and he'll probably get rid of the nose because he realizes it kind of looks ridiculous. Then Iron Man, he notices the Melter, and he remembers the Melter from the Melter's time in the Masters of Evil. He thought they were still in prison. Iron Man does admit that sometimes he does lose track. So if this guy's on parole, Iron Man's just going to be harassing him. And then he's noticing the Melter is speaking to Whiplash and Manbull. And both of these villains were seen in the Midwest. I think Whiplash was in Cincinnati when he was facing off against the Cat. Oh no, Manbull was facing off against the Cat in issue number 4, and Whiplash was facing off against Iron Man in Cincinnati in Iron Man 62. But he's at this point he's writing them off as just simply cosplayers. Then he sees Dr. Octopus, but a much fatter and bolder version of him. And then, Iron Man saying, "Hey, listen, I gotta keep my head clear here. This is not real. These guys aren't real." But suddenly there's a power blast that strikes Iron Man from behind. And before we turn the page, we'll see Spider-Man caught between the jackal and the grizzly, and one will fall. This is issues of Spider-Man, issue number 140. I remember buying that off the newsstand. And turn the page. So then we see the remnants of the aftermath of this blast. It's enough to bring down some of the ceiling. Iron Man feels it in his armor because that was a heat blast, and that came closest to him. So the other cosplayers weren't put in danger. Iron Man, before he has a chance to figure it out, the Melter outs himself. So Iron Man's concerns about the melter, that turned out to be accurate because this is the real melter here. And one of the conventions and Spider-Man saying, if only I had spider powers. Yeah, sometimes how these guys think. I remember in the late 80s, early 90s, there was a poor guy. He was in a Spider-Man outfit, and he was trying to climb a lamppost. And he was asked, and he kind of like held up traffic for like 30 minutes or so. And then he was asked by the reporters when he was caught and taken by EMS, why'd he do it? And the guy said, I wanted to prove that Spider-Man is real and fighting crime. So yeah, some of these guys, if they cosplay as something, they're gonna have that little power trip. We see Whiplash is free, is also real, I should say, not free, but he's real. It looks like they were here for a heist, so I'm figuring they're probably trying to buy that purple pig. They're trying to steal, I should say, that purple pig #1, because none of these guys are going to spend $5,000 for that. And you split it 3 ways too, so they're getting less than like $1,300 for this. This is not a heist. This is not a heist, a real one. But then Iron Man, he figures out, okay, I'm going to be dealing with these 3 guys, at least Whiplash and the Melter, because they look real. But then there's a black smoke that comes out as Iron Man's about to attack, because and it turns out to be the Black Llama. And we're told that, quote, he's the guy who set up that villainous power struggle, offering global power to the victory. That was the supervillains war. I know I have at least one issue of that because I like the cover of MODOK on it. So this is like this is in reference to the supervillain war that was being fought in the Iron Man comic books. And I think Iron Man had to deal with the Mandarin, the old one and the new one, since the old one was killed off in that battle. Yellow Jacket, the Black Llama was the one making the promise. So those guys were fighting on the behalf of what the Black Llama was going to give them. But I think the Black Llama also kind of wanted to be actively involved in the fighting too. So he's confronting Iron Man here, and he doesn't understand exactly what the Black Llama's plan, because he's just basically saying, hey, if any of you guys win this contest, that includes you, MODOK, I'll give you all these powers. And Whiplash doesn't know who the Black Llama is, so he's being a bit smart with him, and he's saying, who are you, bozo? If you think you can. And he's immediately interrupted by the Black Llama, who says, silence, flea. I'm going to turn the page. Okay, so now I'm going to get to the letters page. Socket the Shellhead. Take a look at the first letter. It's from Brian from California. He's talking about how he's starting to really warm up to Iron Man. That initially he didn't really care much for George Tuska's artwork, but ever since he's been reading these new stories, he's been more impressed with the way George Tuska kind of lays out a story. He's calling him a powerful artist. I wouldn't go that far. And the writer's also mentioning, as I had mentioned, the supervillain playoffs. This is sort of, I guess, kind of a precursor to the Secret Wars that came out like 10 years later, more than 10 years later. And this is kind of a crossover, because you had, what was the big crossover at the time this comic was coming out? Captain Marvel. So I think they were trying to sort of try to recreate that issues-long epic super hit villain battle. I think DC had done their version of this a few years later. I remember there was a 3-part arc with Batman where it was the Criminal Olympics, and apparently all these criminals from Batman's past, they got together and they agreed to have this Olympics type tournament, and the prize was Batman. So whoever got to beat Batman, they got the gold. It was a dumb as shit story. I think the guy who wrote it was writing comic books in the 1940s, literally, and it just fell flat. I think that this is sort of a precursor to that. This is a much more better remembered arc. I know there are a lot of Iron Man fans who talk about this arc fondly. They're mentioning that you should bring in Doctor Doom, saying that you can't really call it like a great supervillains lineup without Doctor Doom. They were already breaking off Doctor Doom into his own comic, shared comic. Then he's going into the globe, and I don't know what exactly he's going into. Yeah, he's just talking about the rest of the arc. Yeah, he kind of likes it. They're saying to Brian, there's some interesting thoughts here, and we can't tip our hand because the arc's still going. But you have a lot of good ideas. The next letter is from Tom. He's saying, killing Shellhead's number one foe, the Mandarins, at the hands of Yellow Claw was appalling, especially the spineless way he bought it. And as for the clown who took Mandy's rings, well, forget him. He'll never be the villain Mandy was. In closing, I would just like to say Iron Man's new mask is absolutely repulsive. So this guy hates Iron Nose, and this guy's kind of pissed at the way the Mandarin was killed off. And he was killed off kind of ceremoniously. He was killed off karate chopping a booby-trapped android version of the Yellow Claw that exploded in his face, and he killed him. And the Yellow Claw, he came out saying, ha ha ha, I punked this guy, he's dead. But the weird thing is that the Mandarin's corpse had those 10 rings, those 10 very powerful rings. Yellow Claw had no interest in them. He told one of his lackeys, hey, burn this body, get it off the floor.
Pick that up. Let's go.
And the lackey did it, but the lackey took the rings for himself. And that was, quote, the new Mandarin. And this is why the guy's angry, because it seems very kind of ceremoniously dumped. Take a look down here at the subscription service. We see one of the covers here. It is Spider-Man number 140. There's the Avengers when they're fighting the monsters of Legion. I love that cover. And a couple, Man-Thing and Dracula. And they're saying that if you order more than $10 worth of comics, they'll send you a poster. It looks really nice. Turn the page. And we're going to continue with the letters here. They're mentioning the mask. Apparently they're saying Stan Lee likes the mask. And it was his idea to put into play. So they're blaming Stan Lee here for the new mask. But they're also mentioning that Stan Lee also listens to people, and if you guys start saying you hate the mask, he'll get rid of it. They're foisting all of this on Stan Lee. And clearly, if they get enough letters that say, hey, dump that mask, they'll get rid of it. I thought that was kind of the same way with Roxy, when Roxy, Robert was mentioned earlier in the comics. And it was kind of this, hey guys, you better start writing about this character or we'll get rid of her. There's another letter from Staten Island talking about Iron Man number 40, saying that he liked the story, but he didn't like the way it was structured. And that it was broken up into too many parts. Yeah, so he's not necessarily complaining about the storyline itself, but he's complaining about the story structure. Here's a second letter talking about 97. Issue number 70. And it's a little critical of what they're doing. He's saying you're doing some good things here, but you're doing some kind of crappy things here. Mike Friedrichs has been doing great work. George Tuska has been doing great work. The guy's pointing out a minor error here. And then editorial does a strange thing, and this is why I think maybe Roy Thomas wrote this. They start talking about the new X-Men and the rollout of the new X-Men, and they say right here that this is a good time to announce it in the letters department here. They're saying that this letter, we're not going to answer it. It's stupid. It's beneath us. Fuck this David guy. And we're gonna talk about something completely different. And they're talking about the new X-Men here. Dave Cockrum is the tentative artist, but he hasn't nailed down the job yet. But they're hoping he will, because the problem with Dave was always speed. The art was excellent, but the problem was he was kind of a slow artist. So they're talking about the new X-Men here. I'm thinking that probably Roy Thomas is the one who would want to talk about the new X-Men, not necessarily Mike Friedrich. Although Mike Friedrich had a little bit of input. They're talking about Sunfire here. Oh, this is the letter that was offensive. The writer, Bill, is saying that he likes the change in Sunfire from being kind of villainous to morphing into a less gullible dupe. Because one of the things about Sunfire and the way he was used, he was always somebody's token, and he was always being spent. So the complaint was with Sunfire that either he was foolishly following some other villain and just being a lackey, or he was always jumping to the wrong conclusion. Sunfire was a character that was never right about anything. He couldn't be right about being wrong. That's how bad he was. And the writer's also mentioning Sunfire's hot temper and his huge ego. Sunfire did have a huge ego. It was annoying as fuck. He thought he was better than everybody. He was annoying to deal with, and he was always losing his temper too. He was a huge dick. He was in issue number 118. There's a moment where the X-Men have to sneak into Japan, and they're kind of sneaking into this military base for whatever reason, I forgot. But the thing is, it's being guarded by Sunfire. Sunfire comes across them, right? He sees them, he talks to them. He knows they're the X-Men. But then he pulls the dick move of when the guards show up. He says, I don't know any of these guys. Throw them into a jail cell. And I think even Cyclops called him out for that dick move. Because he's saying, you know who we are. So this is what the writer's complaining about. He wants a less asshole-ish from Sunfire. He's also talking about the Mandarin. Now he's getting to the Mandarin, saying that this was kind of a stereotype that was foisted on Asian Americans by racist white people. This is how racist white people saw Asians, and he said that images of the Mandarin and the Yellow Claw, and kind of like that. Oh, so you have fell into my trap. Those type of villains, the Asian Americans find them very offensive. And it's understandable. They would. Even the name Mandarin kind of conjures up those bad, Hollywood stereotypes. And he's saying that, the storylines itself have been kind of like borderline yellow peril. So Asians are kind of used to these stories about how they're painted as the villain, and how they, you have to be on the lookout for the Asians. I mean, we even saw that recently, during COVID. It was called Kung Flu or something like that. Now he's saying that, okay, if you're going to be racist that way, can you at least tone it down a little? So this poor guy, he's not even saying, okay, get rid of all the racism. He's saying, if you have to be racist, can you be a little quieter about it? And then he has some specific criticisms toward George Tuska, saying that George Tuska draws very stereotypical Asian figures. They have the stereotypical buck teeth from those really horrible propaganda films during World War II. And he's saying, can you stop doing that? It's racist. And just simply make your villain look like a villain without evil in your making. And this is all very reasonable stuff. And he's pointing to specific patterns that he's noticing. This is from Bill Wu, who is from Prairie Village, Kansas. So this is an Asian American guy in the middle of Kansas. The response from editorial is, racism in comics is one thing Marvel has tried to avoid, but we believe it is racism of another sort just because a villain comes from a particular culture he is not used to. You see, we're trying to incorporate villains from Asia. You're not used to that. You're not comfortable with that, Mr. Asian Man. And because of this, you're seeing that as racism when it's really not racism. And he's saying, Marvel, we have heroes of all races. It's just that we just don't highlight many of them. And we don't want to pander. We don't want to pander to you and your complaints of racism. And here's the non-apology. If you personally have been offended, we apologize. If you've been offended, because it's debatable. And then they say literally that you should reread our racist comics and realize that you're the racist for calling us racist. This is the argument being made. So this is kind of wild there. Going to turn the page. Look at it in ad. Looks like it's for Spider-Man statues. I remember these. These are very plastic models here, and the models were all the same color. So it's not like they colored the models on top of this flimsy plastic. You did get a comic book with it, but not the one that would be off the newsstand. Here's some other Marvel merchandise, the squirt gun, the crazy foam. I remember that. I made my mom buy that. The Spider-Mobile and other toys. So I'm going to go back to the story. And we see Iron Man, he's faced off against the Black Llama. And the Black Llama is the one who's behind this entire thing, because he's the one who is offering all these supervillains all this power if they compete in this contest he has set up. But at the same time, the Black Llama kind of wants to put his finger on the scale, and he wants a little glory for himself, his own games. So he's also not adverse to fighting Iron Man directly. But apparently, what's going on is that Black Llama is using the power of suggestion. And he has Whiplash, Melter, and Man-Bull to fight for him. Man-Bull counters first. He's a Daredevil villain mostly. And as he's attacking, Whiplash grabs Iron Man by the right ankle. They're looking to split Iron Man here into two. However, Iron Man he uses his leg to kind of Whiplash into the Man-Bull. So at this point, Whiplash tying Iron Man up actually worked against him. And we're also told that the return of the most unexpected character of all will be in the Amazing Adventures number 28. It was probably Killraven, because I think after or Deathlock. It was either Killraven or Deathlock at this point. Turn the page. See Iron Man. He's fighting Whiplash. He's fighting Man-Bull. We see once again Black Llama is getting involved. So Black Llama, even though he's presenting this, he's not really presenting this as a fair fight, because he didn't make any promises to Iron Man this would be a fair fight. So Black Llama, he's actively involved in this contest. And the thing is, we see that the crowd of cosplayers who are in superhero costumes, Marvel superhero costumes, they're going wild. They're enjoying the show. This is similar to the end of Galaxy Quest, when the conventioners thought that when the ship burst into the convention center, that whole thing that they played out was part of the show.
Quick, move!
It looks like what had happened is that the Black Llama, he had used his power to put his influence on the cosplayers. So the cosplayers are coming forward and toward Iron Man. So it kind of looks like, Thor, Captain America, and Spider-Man are about to attack Iron Man. But it's really the cosplayers. And Iron Man knows this. He knows that these people are they're under the influence. They're not super powered. So he kind of just uses light rather than energy. I know the two are the same. But he uses light to sort of, I guess, maybe dehypnotize the crowd. Anyway, he doesn't want to use a power blast on them. So he's kind of hoping that will break them out of their spell, and they'll be out of the way. Iron Man, he goes on the offensive. He goes after Man-Bull, who's the strongest of the trio. Man-Bull is saying, hey, he told us you're really powerful. Now, he kind of could have learned that from reading the newspaper. Man-Bull doesn't look like he's a guy who reads newspapers, though. So right now, Iron Man's looking like he's in good shape. Turn the page. We see another ad, but I'm not going to look through it. Nothing of interest, really. Oh, except for this one thing. I think they're still sending live creatures in the mail. You can get seahorses live, and you can get imported birds like hawks, falcons, eagles, and owls. It says here that, no birds of prey native to North America. And you have to have licensing and stuff like that. Dude, seriously, don't send live stuff through the mail. Turn the page, see another ad. See, ding, ding, ding. Nothing interesting. Okay, so I'm going to go back to the story. Black Llama has decided to cut out. He's not getting anything out of this fight. He's kind of given up on these three guys, and he's just saying, "Hey, I'm just gonna lay on the sofa at this point." Iron Man can't figure Black Llama out. He's kind of confused about what his motivations are. But he realizes he has to stop at least the Melter and the other two. The Melter is going after that comic book. Obviously, it's a little problematic. You're a guy, you're the Melter. Are you going to really trust your comic book with this guy? He asks, can he read your issue of Spider-Man number 129 or X-Men 94? Can you really trust this guy to give that comic back to you in mint condition, given that he has a device that can easily burn paper? But nevertheless, he's complaining. He wants the guys to open the glass casing with the comic book. There are these high-tech security devices because after all, this is a comic book. You have to protect those, even with lethal doses of electricity. And that's what the Melter feels. He's not killed, but he feels this electricity going through him. Iron Man punches a hole through the wall. Melter catches Iron Man as he's coming in, so he really didn't catch him by surprise. Just kind of mildly kind of put him on notice. The Melter is pressing his advantage. You know, he's continuing to put Iron Man on his heels. And we're told that underneath is Defenders versus the Wrecking Crew for the Life of New York, now on sale. I absolutely loved that arc when the Defenders were going up against the Wrecking Crew, particularly the conclusion. The conclusion was absolutely amazing. So we're gonna turn the page. Iron Man, he is fighting with repulsor rays.
He's fighting and smiting with repulsor rays.
There's a tragedy here. There is a huge tragedy. There are some Thor comics in danger of being burnt, because when the Melter sent out his blast, he hit some of the dealers' tables there. These dealers going nuts because they're seeing their reason for being burnt, and one guy's pointing out, hey, if these comics are burnt and not in mint condition, I can't sell them. He's desperately trying to put the fire out. Iron Man, speaking for all comic book employees, was saying, "You fool, get away from there. You'll kill yourself over lost money." Because I'm sure the whole thing about how comic books were valued must have kind of drove some of the comic creators crazy. We see a police officer. He has a fire extinguisher. He uses the fire extinguisher. He puts out the fire, but he destroys the comic books. So that is a tragedy for the comic book dealers. The Melter, he strikes Iron Man from behind as he's watching this comic holocaust happening. Iron Man is feeling it. He's on the ground here. He doesn't feel he has a chance. The Melter has him. But then what happens is he's saved by the cosplay Iron Man. The cosplay Iron Man leaps at the Melter and stops the Melter from firing the lethal shot. The Iron Man's impressed. So real Iron Man is impressed with fake Iron Man. He's thanking his alter ego, saying, "Listen, that little break gave me what I needed." And Iron Man karate chops the Melter. You can turn the page. You can take a look at the Marvel bullpen bulletins. So we have Stan's soapbox. He's talking about the Comic-Con, and he's talking about the origins of Marvel Comics. Yeah, he's just kind of talking in circles here. He's also talking about the electric company. So Stan's not really saying anything of note. So we take a look at the first item. Apparently Marvel has a softball team, and they beat the Village Voice. Village Voice was an alternative newspaper. I read that in the 1980s. Another item is Iron Fist. Iron Fist is slated to become a regular comic book. He did well in Marvel Premiere. So, and they're also talking about Marvel Preview, which is like their $1 comics. So they want to remind the kids to spend that extra money on those higher priced items. They're talking about Marvel Preview, which is a magazine, and they're talking about Man Gods. And we see a one panel preview of it, as this impressive-looking space alien walks off, and he's surrounded by these kind of 2001 simian creatures. The other item is about Len Wein, saying that Len Wein is writing Fantastic Four, but he's going to be promoted soon. He was promoted around this time. He was the reason why he had to leave the X-Men. And the reins were given to Chris Claremont, who Chris Claremont was clearly campaigning for the job. But Roy apparently Len enjoyed writing for the X-Men, but it got to the point where his workload got so great that he had to pass off the full-time duties to Chris Claremont. And comic book readers could not have been happier. I love those soap operas. And the last one is about Jim Starlin. Apparently Jim Starlin had a little time to do Giant-Sized Defenders. I think he did that partial fill-in issue. There was an issue of Giant-Sized Defenders 1 where it's sort of like retellings of the origins of the three main heroes. So they chose 3 stories from the past. And this allowed them to do a partial original story as kind of like a, one character showing the other character where these heroes came from. And somehow the spell from Cleo gets out of hand. And so forth. It's a really good issue, but there is reprinted material in it. Okay, so turn the page. Okay, yeah, don't need to look at this ad. So we're getting near the conclusion. Iron Man, he's thankful at this point. He has a rest here because the Melter has been taken out of action. The other 2 are not very active at this point. Iron Man thinks he's going to have it easy here. However, the Black Llama shows up. And the Black Llama shows up with one of those scimitar swords, if I pronounced it correctly. Those are those really round swords that you would see in Aladdin. And the thing is, there's no speaking from him. He's just simply going to slice and dice Iron Man here. Iron Man... he realized this could be instant death. However, the thing is, the Melter's there. And the Melter is like, if I can't kill Iron Man, no one can. And the Melter attacks the Black Llama. And the Black Llama feels this attack. Because the Black Llama is currently on fire. Black Llama sort of has that heavy sheepskin suit. So he's on fire, and he teleports out of the battle theater. So he's no longer a threat. He's already gone. The Melter faints because that was all the energy he had left. And we're told underneath that the return of the most unexpected character of all in Thor issue number 230. Again, I was never a Thor reader. Because I didn't like Asgard. So I'm going to turn the page here. Iron Man's looking at the Melter. The Melter is knocked unconscious. The other 2 villains aren't active. And all 3 of them have been tied up. And they've been captured by the San Diego police. San Diego police. The San Diego police. I remember once I was waiting for a bus. I was on the sidewalk about maybe half a step away from the curb. This is Sunday morning. And suddenly, on the other side of the street, a police car suddenly stopped. And the bullhorn rang, "Get back on the sidewalk." And me and the guy who just happened to be there, we just looked at each other. Just amazed how this guy can enforce this rule. And I remember there was another incident. It was near the trolley, near Gaslamp Quarter. And there was a homeless woman. She was clearly homeless from her looks. And she was yelling, and she kind of was acting out a little bit, but just being loud. But the police officer that was like dealing with her, he kept in shooting stance the entire time. That guy was prepared to like pull out his gun at like the smallest little thing. And thankfully she didn't do anything like that. But I'm like, dude, seriously, this is a 60-year-old woman. So anyway, that's my thing with the San Diego police. They've been captured, and they're going to be taken to the station. The convention goees, they're happy with Iron Man. They're saying this is a terrific story. Gets a huge round of applause. There's this one guy saying, "Oh, I still want Seymour." I'm assuming that was that not Brand X mascot that nobody cared about. So Iron Man's trying to leave the convention center, and he's stopped by security here. This is supposed to be some humor because the security guard knew nothing of the battle inside, and he's being escorted out. And he's saying, I might as well just leave anyway on a high note. I'm kind of tired here. And then we're told that the next issue, Iron Man returns to Vietnam for the battle of his life against his own weapons and the Crimson Dynamo. So that was it. I thought this is a good issue. I thought it was a little... I had some fun watching the comic book guys like take pokes at the comic book fans. And we see a full-page ad for the Treasury edition of the Fantastic Four. Again, Marvel and DC, they wanted their fans to spend more money on higher-priced items. These did not sell very well initially on the newsstand. They weren't returnable. They were a little expensive. So the comic book stands had to keep them. And some comic book stands had these for years. They eventually would throw them into a box. And they did sell down, although the newsstand guys had to wait a long time for their money. It came in trickles. But yeah, I love these Treasury editions. And that's it. And that is my review of Iron Man 72, and I hope to have more reviews up soon. Bye.